Last week, cult leader Eligio Bishop, aka Natureboy, was sentenced to life without parole. Today, we are going to review the sentencing hearing and talk a little bit about the aftermath of this decision. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're brand new. My name is Erin and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. My goal with this channel is to create more awareness about dangerous people, dangerous groups, and try to understand manipulative people a little bit more so that we can all do our best to avoid these kinds of people. And I used to recommend a book at the beginning of my videos, and I haven't done that in several months, so I thought I would go ahead and do that again today. Today's book is 20 Years Later by Charles Donley, or Donlia. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the name. I could barely put this book down. It is that good. It tells the story of this reporter who I'd also like to say I'd love to play in the movie version of this. I know she's supposed to be tall with dark hair, but I will dye my hair black and wear stilts. But it tells the story of this reporter who starts chasing this story about 9/11 because there are remains discovered in the wreckage 20 years later. And the remains that are found were actually tied to a long lost murder that had occurred just before 9/11. And so she starts to unpack all of these twists and turns, not just about the murder, but she has some dark things about her own past. And she just uncovers a lot. I mean, if you like content like what I'm sharing with you and true crime and mystery, then this is the book for you. I highly, highly recommend it. So, I know last week a lot of us were celebrating the fact that Eligio Bishop is going to be in prison for the rest of his life. He does have time to appeal, and there are people who are pushing for a new trial, claiming that he had an unfair trial. Some people think it's still malicious prosecution. Others think that he was not issued a fair trial because the judge came to work with. Even if we were to do a retrial of this case, all of the facts remain the same. The prosecution, in my opinion, did an excellent job trying to explain and showcase what a cult looks like and how people can get sucked in. If you want me to review the testimonies from many of the people in this case, please comment down below. I'd be happy to do that. Rick Allen's Ross testimony was fascinating. So it would be really interesting to try to break that down. I think one of the most difficult aspects of this particular case is the fact that there still are several people supporting Eligio Bishop and calling for a new trial, claiming malicious prosecution, and overall just not being able to understand what exactly the victimhood looks like for the survivors of Eligio Bishop. A lot of the people who are still supporting Eligio Bishop keep trying to show examples and post about the victims who came forward, sharing videos of when they were in the group and talking about how wonderful Eligio is and how they consented to the acts that they performed or were performed on them. And none of that really matters because coerced consent is not the same as consent. I think it's incredibly important that whomever is looking at this case, whether it's me or someone who still supports Eligio or who is just kind of trying to put all the pieces of this really complicated puzzle together, what we have to understand, and what I think the prosecution did an excellent job of doing, we have to understand undue influence, coercive control, and what the mindset of someone who's been sucked into a cult is like. Oftentimes, when someone's in a cult, the leader might coerce them or try to convince them, or sometimes even force them to share positive testimonials, go online and either make a video or a post about how wonderful the group is, how wonderful the leader is. And there's always this threat of something, right? Whether it's threat of losing your child, threat of losing your community, threat of losing your home. What we have to remember with the survivors of this particular case is they were not allowed to leave. Eligio collected their passports and their money. It would have been nearly impossible for them to escape, especially when they were in pretty remote parts of the world and weren't familiar with their surroundings and didn't speak the language. So we have to invoke some level of empathy for the victims just based off of that alone, because there was no escape. And if there's no escape, then you can't say no to the leader because you're going to be stuck and you're going to have to endure whatever abuse he decides to dole out on you if you say no or if you resist him. So if Eligio was to tell one of his victims, I need you to go online and talk about how great I am, and they said no, they were at the risk of getting beaten. They ran the risk of getting hurt. They ran the risk of something happening to their child. They ran the risk of getting R-worded. And for some of these women, that happened to them. So I think that before we jump into the sentencing, because I want to watch the video with you guys, I do think it's an appropriate sentence for Alio Bishop because someone who's been behaving this way for so long and can't take any accountability for his bad behavior and can't take a moment to acknowledge their bad behavior, there's no way they're going to be able to grow and avoid that behavior in the future. The reason he's been put away for the rest of his life is because he is a threat. He is a danger to those around him. He is incredibly manipulative. We have seen that he has a way of getting under people's skin and getting them to do his dirty work for him. He's no different than the cult leaders before him. Keith Raniere, David Koresh, Warren Jeffs. These people are dangerous, and they use very specific tactics to brainwash people and get people to do what they want. It all looks kosher and safe and welcoming at first, but the longer you stay in, the more dangerous it becomes. Brainwashing and indoctrination is not a quick process. So when you ask, why didn't you see the red flags? Why didn't you leave earlier? Because at the beginning, it never looks like it's a dangerous group. In the beginning, Natureboy's group, Carbonation, looked like people living off of the land, embracing their skin, embracing their culture, embracing nature, trying to live one with nature, which can resonate with a lot of people. But if you're already aligning with those beliefs and then you're forced to sit and listen to Eligio Bishop wax poetic night after night after night, it's slowly going to get into your mind. And if the leader starts showing interest in you, you might start feeling special, one of the ultimate chosen ones, because God essentially is picking you. So it's really important, and I want to make this very clear because, yes, it was his ex wives, or one of them at least, who came forward and started this whole thing off. Just because at one point they supported Eligio Bishop does not mean that they are not victims, and it does not mean that they've told any lies. It means that they were coercively controlled. It means they were not in their right mind. It means that they were trapped. They had no other option besides doing what Eligio said. And if you can't accept that and at least try to understand what undue influence is, what the tactics are regarding coercive control, if you're unwilling to educate yourself and learn about those things, then you really don't have any place to share an opinion about what's going on because you simply don't understand. And since the aftermath of this has been his supporters still calling for a new trial and trying to speak poorly on the survivors, I think it's really important to say that because some of the comments I've been seeing, not necessarily on these videos, but on a lot of other videos I've been seeing, there's a distinct and harsh lack of compassion and empathy for the victims. This is all about holding someone accountable for their bad behavior. And Eligio has done terrible, terrible things to these women, and we've seen that he's incapable of taking any accountability. And to the people who still support him, I really hope that you are able to heal. I hope that one day you recognize that you're a victim too, and you're a victim of Eligio Bishop. So, with all of that being said, I want to review some of the sentencing hearing. I'm going to go ahead and link down below the link to this sentencing hearing because there are really important victim impact statements. Because what happens before sentencing, so the jury, if you don't know, the jury will share whether they believe that he's guilty or not guilty. And they found Eligio guilty on all counts in this case. And before sentencing, the judge will hear both victim impact statements and statements from Eligio and both sides. So the prosecution and the defense. Now, I believe that the victim's impact statements are incredibly valuable and very important to listen to, although it is very heartbreaking and difficult to hear, and I know that it's not necessarily for everyone. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the video where it's mostly the judge doing her sentencing, and I'll leave a link down below to the full video so you can watch the full victim's impact statements and hear for yourself what they have to say. If you are curious about some more details regarding the case, I did go through the full pre-trial testimony, and I'll link that video right here. It's quite a lengthy video. It's a little bit hard to get through because there's a lot of graphic details regarding what happened to these women. And so please use viewer discretion. So in addition to hearing the victim's impact statements, we also heard from Eligio, who actually did not testify in his own trial because he was concerned about the judge having. Furthermore, I believe one of his witnesses was banned from the courtroom. Overall, that day of testimony was just a crap show. So obviously, his defense had a really hard job to do, and I think that his representative, Mr. Booker, did the best he could with what he was given, but we're also going to hear from him. But to begin, we are going to hear what Eligio has to say, and I'm just going to unpack it a little bit for all of us.
Do you want to be heard? Come on up to the, if you do, come on up to the podium. And we'll swear you in.
Raise your right hand.
Do you swear and attest to the testimony about to give the truth?
For sure. At all times.
All right, what is it you'd like me to consider?
I just want to say something to all of them.
Well,
I just want to say.
Just direct it to me, please, not to.
I'll direct it to you. I'll direct it to you.
Okay.
Are you happy? Are you happy?
I'm not answering any questions of yours, Mr.
I forgive you. I forgive you, and I still love you.
He's going to forgive all of us. Remember, guys, he's God, and God forgives everybody. That's the message he's trying to send here. He hasn't apologized. He hasn't taken accountability. He was just found guilty and is being sentenced to life. And he's choosing to be almost like a martyr. He's choosing to act like he's stepping above it. And just wait, there's more.
I forgive you, and I still love you. I got nothing in my heart. I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset with you.
Because he's God, he still loves you no matter what. He's playing into this idea that he is being persecuted just like Jesus was. You know what I mean? I mean, he's called himself the Messiah, and he is still playing into it even now.
I forgive you. I want you to know I still love you and forgive you. And kiss my baby girl.
It's there's almost no words because it's like, do I want this person to take accountability for what he did, or do I want him to see him just show his true colors, which he is showing his true colors throughout the entire trial. He's shown that he is incapable of taking responsibility. He's incapable of listening to authority. He's incapable of understanding the importance of the situation that he's in. He's a dangerous person, in my opinion. I believe that if he had been let out and was free, he would just continue doing this to these people, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did try to enact some kind of revenge on these women, on everyone who spoke out against him, because there were men who spoke out against him too.
I know I love her. And I love y'all. I would never, I don't have no, I promise you, you know how I am. In my heart, you know how I am. I still love you. I still fuck with you. I still love you.
All right,
I still,
I got
and
that.
no hate on,
Okay.
no hate.
Is there anything
My
else?
heart light as a feather. I promise you, I love you and I'm still here. I ain't missed one lick. I see what y'all doing, and I want you to know, I forgive you. And I see y'all in the end.
All right, thank you.
I love you. I love you.
All right, I just muted the courtroom. We're done with that. All right, what is the recommendation?
He forgives them. He forgives them for talking about how he raped them and committed revenge porn against them and trapped them. He forgives them. It's despicable. If he might have not got, like, people who are like, there's no reason he should have gotten life in prison without parole. That's way too harsh of a sentence. Well, then why didn't he take any amount of accountability? He couldn't even say, I'm sorry that you're feeling hurt. He couldn't even say, I'm sorry for any of it. And yet people are complaining that he is getting life without parole. He's getting life without parole because he's been deemed a danger to the public, because he's incapable of taking accountability. And I'm not here to diagnose him. I am not a professional psychologist. It's not my place to diagnose anybody. Because I know when I make videos like this, people like to diagnose people and stuff like that. And that's fine if you want to share that down in the comments. I don't recommend it simply because we don't know this person personally. But based off of the behavior, it's very clear that he's incapable of taking accountability. And that type of a person is very, very dangerous. And people might argue, well, yeah, if he's innocent, why would he apologize? If he was truly innocent, wouldn't there be more evidence to show that? The evidence was overwhelming that he was operating a cult. Great creators have been talking about this for years, almost a decade. He first started posting stuff online in 2015, end of 2015. People started joining his group in 2016. This has been going on for far too long. People have died because of the things that he has gotten them to do. This is a dangerous, dangerous person. This is a person who has no regard for other people. This is a person who is going to spend life in prison, and what he's worried about is making sure that everyone knows that he's still God because he forgives you. Because isn't he just like Jesus? It's difficult to know that there are people that are still so indoctrinated in this, or it just goes to show that it's really important to keep talking about cults, indoctrination, how people get in, how people get out, why people do things they would never normally do if they weren't in the group. And it's really important to talk about, and it's really important that this stays in the media, and it's really important that we try to understand this a little bit more. We try to understand this dynamic a little bit more, because honestly, I don't blame anyone who still doesn't understand why this person should be put away forever. I understand because it's difficult to wrap your brain around why someone would stay with a person who is consistently hurting them. It's hard for people who don't take the time to try to understand it to have any grasp on it. But when you peel back all the layers and you look at the heart of the issue and you really, really dive deep, you will be able to see that the judge made the right call. You just will.
From the state?
Just a brief
Oh,
argument,
yeah,
if I
sure,
may.
of course.
As I think all of this arises out of obviously an environment where women and the four women that have been before the court, as well as others who have not, were stripped by this defendant of their autonomy, uh, stripped of their strength, and I think this week, last week, those young women took that back in pretty epic fashion. You've watched the defendant in the last 25, 30 minutes, his antics.
And that's so true. This is the women taking their power back. They were really brave to do this, and they're still facing so much backlash doing this. They're still brave. And I do want to say, too, we've seen in many cults, there is sometimes a fine line between being victim and perpetrator. Like I used the example just because most people know about it, the Keith Raniere and Allison Mack. Allison Mack was simultaneously a victim and a perpetrator. She was supporting Keith Raniere and getting women to do all these things for him, but she was also deeply, deeply, deeply manipulated by him. So she was also sentenced because she was guilty of doing bad things to other people. And there are some people who argue, well, so and so who spoke out, she's tried to do X, Y, and Z. And perhaps she did, but the biggest piece of this is she ended up sharing the truth and helping prosecutors expose the dangerous nature of Natureboy. That's what we saw with India Oxenberg, because India Oxenberg was high up on the FBI's list of somebody that might have also been a perpetrator. But then she was able to provide so much information to take Keith Raniere down that she got immunity because she was helping the FBI with their investigation. Regardless how you feel about what some of the people who've spoken forward or stepped forward, what they've said or how they've behaved in the past, or even how they're behaving now, at the end of the day, they are still victims. Even if you disagree with how they've handled certain things, you're entitled to that opinion. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that they are still victims and survivors of this same man who abused many women in very similar ways. And thanks to his years of doing it and years of people speaking out about it, we've been able to prove that pattern of behavior and give him the appropriate sentencing.
Gesturing, the laughing in court as these young women are telling their story to Your Honor again. He does not believe he did anything wrong. And he will, for the rest of his life, be a danger to this community and a danger to any.
And if you go back and you watch the victim impact statements, you'll see Eligio's reaction, and he is laughing. He's trying to talk to the guards. He's behaving, I would argue, erratically. He obviously doesn't believe that he has done anything wrong. He believes that he's going to get away with this. He's probably still believes that he'll be able to get a new trial and get a different sentence. But that's just going to remains to be seen.
Women being counter to this community. Judge, we're asking for, and the state is asking for a sentence on the rape charge of life without the possibility of parole. The other counts to run concurrent.
What are the maximum sentences on the other counts, though?
False imprisonment carries a maximum sentence of 10 years.
Okay.
Count 3, the state's position is that it is a misdemeanor.
The posting
The first revenge porn.
First one is okay.
Counts 4 and 5, excuse me. The second and third revenge porn counts state's position is that each of those maximum sentence is 5 years in custody.
Okay. All right. Any other additional argument? Okay. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Judge.
Sure.
It's an unusual position I find myself in. I'm in the courtroom, my client's not. The witnesses that he would have had here, they were not here because they were banned.
So now this is Eligio's representation, who Eligio also tried to fire, and this man still went forward and represented him, even though he had to face the embarrassment of Eligio trying to fire his representation, who also was one of many lawyers that Eligio was working with throughout this whole process over the last 2 years. And I feel like usually when someone is changing their representation so frequently, it's because a lawyer themselves is either giving them advice that they don't like or don't appreciate, or is giving them truths of what could happen. And in my opinion, someone like Eligio is just trying to manipulate the lawyer themselves, the attorney themselves. So this is one of many that he's gone through.
In the courthouse.
So the only, just let me make the record clear, the only folks that I instructed the sheriff's department to ban were the folks that acted out on the stand and or acted out in the gallery. Those were my instructions.
Yes,
So
Your Honor.
there have been threats, there have been all sorts of things being made to court staff, to court employees, to everybody throughout this process. So
Yes, ma'am.
in the interest of maintaining decorum and as much security as we can, that was my decision. And also, before you go forward, I forgot to put one thing on the record.
Okay.
I asked Mr. Bishop earlier if he wanted to return to the courtroom this afternoon, and he initially said yes.
Which I don't know what they're trying to accomplish in doing that. You can't fire your attorney midway through a trial, and you sure as surely can't sit on the witness stand and claim malicious prosecution without getting kicked out of the courtroom, and you can't threaten personnel in the courthouse because you're not getting your way. You can't claim malicious prosecution and then do things maliciously because you think that that's going to change anyone's mind. This is going by the book. This is what justice looks like. Just because you don't like the outcome doesn't mean it's malicious prosecution.
And I said, all right, we'll make arrangements for you to do that while the jury, or after the jury rewatched and re-listened to the evidence they requested to see.
That's okay.
And then he wanted to talk to you, and I understand you called him and you came back in and you told me that he changed his mind and did not want to come back.
That is correct, Judge.
Okay.
I did speak to him, and the jury went back out and continued to deliberate, and he maintained his
Okay.
stay.
That's fine. I just, because it was on the record that he wanted to come and he's still in the jail courtroom, so that's why I wanted to clear that up. All right.
Yes, sure.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No worries. Portia Wayne and Caleb Butler, they were the only two witnesses. I don't know what happened with them, but they're not here at the courthouse.
Okay.
But to Ms. to Ken, as a defense attorney, my job and my obligation is to zealously defend my client.
And I'm sorry, but if you don't want to actively participate in your own trial, you can't claim a mistrial. And I get you don't want to be in the same room as someone with the Rona. Like I said that in my previous video regarding this. But if you're the only outlier that doesn't want to stay in the courtroom and you're refusing to testify and you're refusing to be in the courtroom during the most crucial time of your defense. He left the courtroom when it was his turn to call witnesses. So he couldn't, tap on his lawyer's shoulder and say, make sure you ask about this or this detail needs to be clarified. He wasn't able to do that because he decided to go sit back in the jail. And then he refused to come today. He's not actively participating, and he was incredibly unruly in front of the judge. I think there are some lawyers who have come forward and said, well, yeah, Eligio did have a right to pause the trial, and that may very well be true, but I think that, like, the reason the judge and everyone in the room wanted this to move forward is because, once again, Eligio has a pattern of trying to delay proceedings. He has a pattern of being difficult. The court I mean, the Clayton Eckhart case that I covered recently, let me know if you want an update on that one because there are some more, like, wild details that have come out. But recently they had a deposition and the trial isn't scheduled until June, and they had the deposition on March 1st. So it takes time to schedule out a trial because courtrooms get booked up. So if they had pushed the trial back, the trial might have gotten pushed months later. So we can see how it gets very sticky and it gets really difficult to just keep pushing back trials because someone gets sick. And look, I understand I'm very, very cautious about corona. I still am very careful. I probably wouldn't want to be in that courtroom either, but I probably would have masked up and just grinned and bared it because everyone else was fine with the situation. So I understand the argument, but what we also have to consider is Eligio Bishop's pattern of behavior, his combativeness with the judge, and him very openly seeming to want to get rid of the judge, pause the trial. I mean, he was just trying to do anything he could to not go through with this judicial process. And I believe the judge saw right through that and was basically like, we are doing this no matter what. We have to finish this here. Otherwise, it will never end. And it needs to end. It needed to end.
Watched a lot of hurt between all four of them. Um, there's only one true God, and it's not Eligio Bishop, and he knows that.
I really love that his own defense lawyer is saying all that. His own defense lawyer is saying that he believes the women. I think that is a huge statement to be making.
And I'm sorry with everything these folks have had to go through in this case. I do think Mr. Bishop, though judge, is redeemable. I do not think a life without parole sentence is appropriate. I think life obviously is 30 years, is what it currently is before he be eligible for parole. I would ask the court to give him the opportunity to get parole in the future and let the parole board determine whether or not he is redeemable. Obviously, this has been a very challenging trial. It's been a lot of emotion on all ends. I've seen people in very difficult positions that I had to cross-examine. But in a nutshell, Judge, I'm asking the court to sentence him to a life with the possibility of parole sentence, or if you're not willing to do just life, maybe do a life with consecutive time, but not do it without parole. Let the parole board determine in 30 years whether or not he is redeemable or not.
You know, cases like this feel so complicated because on one hand, you want people to be redeemable, like he's saying. I guess I was really shocked at the no parole aspect of it, if especially he wouldn't be eligible for parole for another 30 years, then he would be in his 70s at that time. I don't believe I mean, I believe that Eligio got life without parole because he was so combativeness and because of his own behavior throughout the trial. And of course, on top of all of the terrible things that he did. But I mean, I think throughout this trial, he really has shown that he can't take accountability. And so, what would he have to say to a parole board? I guess is the question. But I don't know, guys. What do you think? Do you think life without parole is harsh? Do you think he should be getting parole in a few years or 30 years? What do you guys think? I'm really curious to hear what you think.
I will state that he has no prior felony convictions that I'm aware of. He's never been convicted of anything. He did own a barbershop here in Atlanta, as he had stated before he left on his journey. Mr. Bishop, his parents, as I understand, both of them were, he didn't have parents. He was raised in New York, and at a very young age, I think both his parents either abandoned him or were killed. And so he doesn't have much in the way of family or in the way of history.
So he's really trying to invoke some empathy from the judge here. He's trying to share, like, okay, maybe Eligio did bad things, but he had a really hard upbringing, which, in my opinion, we've seen it with a lot of the serial killers I've covered on this channel, that just because you have a difficult life doesn't mean that you can grow up and do terrible things to other people. It means that there's a lot you might have to process. It means that you might have to do a little extra work to become a better person. But I think that you can fully, and I don't know the exact situations that Eligio was born into, and being born into a certain set of circumstances can determine where you end up in the world. But but also a person can determine if they let that hold them back or allow themselves to grow from that or be productive or successful, whatever that might mean to that person. I don't believe that it justifies doing terrible things to other people. I think it can understand why someone does terrible things to other people, but it doesn't justify the behavior, in my opinion.
There's been a lot of things that have happened to him, in my opinion, that put him in the position that he's in right now. But I would ask the court for whatever discretion the court is willing to give for purposes of his sentence.
Thank you. Okay.
I just don't think it's. Why are we victimizing him? I mean, the attorney, Mr. Booker's doing his job. Like, he's doing what he needs to do for his client legally. But Eligio's not the victim here. He's not the victim.
Okay. You know, I would have been inclined to exercise some discretion had Mr. Bishop shown any remorse, guilt, or regret throughout this process. And I saw nothing during the trial but for him laughing and cutting up and looking shocked and surprised at all of the testimony. Mr. Bishop, you're a master manipulator and probably the classic definition of a narcissist, like that I've ever seen. You took advantage of these folks who were essentially lost souls, looking for some guidance, looking for some connection, or looking for some comfort. And you were able to fill a void for them for some reason. But in the process, you completely took advantage of them and have caused potentially, I hope not, but potentially irreparable harm. I hope that all of the victims will be able at some point in time to recover from this and to find some type of peace in their lives. And maybe the verdict will help in that regard. But I hope you all are able to move on at some point and find some peace, whatever that is for you. So with that, I am going to follow the recommendation of the state in this case. On the rape, he'll be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, followed by 10 years consecutive for the false imprisonment. And on the internet porn, count 3, 12 months to serve, concurrent to the false imprisonment. The internet porn, I'll run concurrent to the false imprisonment. Internet, 5 years. So it's 12 months on count 3, 5 years on count 4, and 5 years on count 5. All of that will run concurrent to the false imprisonment. But the false imprisonment is consecutive. So it's life without parole plus 10 years. And hopefully he will never be able to take advantage of anybody else again.
Judge, can you be sure to go over his post-conviction rights with him as well as his...
Yes.
I was just going to put those on the Judge, before, I know there were certain conditions, obviously, with the way the law currently exists in the court's sentence, the defendant will not be out. Just in case the law changes in the future, we would currently exist in the court.
And I think another reason that this is important, even apart from the cult aspect of this case, is the DV aspect of this case. Far too often have women come forward to share their story about being R-worded or otherwise harmed, and they haven't been either believed or there hasn't been enough evidence, hard, factual evidence. The fact that we have someone being issued a life sentence for the R word can set the precedent for future victims to come forward. There's a book called The Cult of One that I want to do a video on. Let me know if you would be interested in that. And the dynamics of being in a relationship like that and being in a cult are very similar in that you're love bombed, you're slowly broken down, and then it's really, really difficult to leave once you decide to leave because maybe the other person controls your finances. Maybe the other person threatens you with violence. You know, maybe there's a child involved. There are so many different things at play that keep oftentimes women, and I'm just saying that because in this case it involves a man and a woman, or several women actually. And I think that something like this can set the precedent for future cases, whether it's a cult situation or a DV situation. And there's such importance in that. There's so much justice to be had in that because so many women don't come forward when they are dealing with that. And obviously, I have to speak very carefully for YouTube, but maybe this will help more women come forward. Maybe knowing that there are judges who listen and understand, and lawyers who understand, and people who are just willing to listen will help other people escape situations that are bad for them and harmful to them and risk their lives. Maybe those people in those situations will feel more safe coming forward. And that's another reason that this case is so, so, so important. We rarely hear of a life in prison sentence for someone who R-worded another person. And it does cause irreparable damage to the person, the victim, whether it's physical or mental or both. And it needs to be taken seriously. So I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think that this case can set the precedent for the future? Do you think that it will empower other women to come forward in the future and protect themselves? I'm really curious to know what you think. And don't worry, I know this is getting long, but we have just a little bit more to watch. I just want to hear some of the additional rules that Eligio has to follow because we are already seeing either him or someone acting as him on his social media breaking those rules.
Ask that the conditions of no contact
Oh,
with
of
any of
course,
the
of
victims,
course.
and that the defendant may not profit financially in any way off of the facts that led to this
Okay.
case.
All right, Mr. Bishop, you're to have absolutely no contact, direct or indirect. That means sending any of your followers to contact them, getting any messages to them, no posting, no internet posting about them, no contact, direct or indirect.
Which, if you look at his Natureboy social media, there are already stories featuring some of the victims who have come forward trying to call them out, which is a violation of this current sentence, whether it's Eligio posting it or one of his cronies posting it. He cannot talk about or to the victims involved in this case. And he's already posted stuff about one of the victims who has come forward. So good luck getting an appeal when you're already violating your current sentence, dude.
No phone calls, emails, no nothing, no visits to their homes, nothing, zero. They don't exist anymore. And you are not to profit in any fashion from the crimes that you have committed. So no book deals for you, no movie rights, nothing. And also with respect to your appellate.
Dang. You know? I think that's great that she's doing that. It makes me wonder if he's able to profit off of any social media like YouTube or anything that he's posted that feature any of the victims. Like, does YouTube just have to shut down that whole page? Like, I'm really curious to the social media aspect of this ruling here.
Rights. Let's see, you have 30 days, I believe, from today to file a motion for a new trial.
That's correct, Judge, and I'll get him a boilerplate motion for
Okay.
the trial file once the sentence is
Okay.
filed.
And
I can.
So I'm sure he's going to file for a new trial. I think I saw on his page a GoFundMe being made. I don't know if we can somehow, if I can find the GoFundMe, I might just like post it or share it down below and try to like contact GoFundMe and be like, this is a fundraiser for a convicted rapist. You might want to, cancel this, make sure the money's refunded. Just seems really shady that you can create a GoFundMe for someone who's in prison for hurting so many people.
He has 30 days from the date of his sentencing, which is today, to file a notice of appeal or a motion for new trial to preserve his direct appeal rights. He also has 4 years from the time that his conviction becomes final to apply for a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. Generally, a conviction is final when all direct appeal rights have expired.
okay.
And he has 1 year on the misdemeanor.
Right. That's right. The one counts as misdemeanor. All right. Anything else?
Judge, on his old indictment, 22 CR 2234, the state has pushed through a null pros order, so that is cleaned up, and that was sent earlier this afternoon.
Okay.
I also sent Ms. Jones with your office and copy Ms. Defense Counsel, but a motion and order to seal the identity of the jurors given the publicity and security threats involved in this case. I just asked that the court consider and grant that motion. There is an order that is also included with that.
Okay. What information, and can you guys approach about that? I don't want to put this.
Okay, so that was the conclusion of the sentencing hearing. I think this judge is amazing. I am personally happy with the sentence and the verdict. I think, like I said before, it can set the precedent and really help with future cases, especially with just certain things that I know are going on with cults that, we talk about or have talked about or will talk about. It's always tricky to get them shut down. It's always tricky to find a way to get people to believe in the truth. And the truth is that whatever cult they're involved in is taking advantage of them and hurting them. But since the cult leader likes to paint a picture that all of us on the outside are naysayers or evil or full of hate in our hearts for the leader or for the group or for them, we don't want what's best for them, when in reality, we do want what's best for them. I want what's best for every person involved in a cult. Every person involved in every cult that I have featured on my channel and the ones I'm featuring in the future, even the people that might have responded to comments and said something hateful who are still involved in one of these groups. I want them to get out too. I'm posting this content for the people who are still in the cult and to advocate for those who have left the cult. And I think it's important for us all to keep talking about it, to keep educating ourselves about it. And I'm, again, so inspired by the people that came forward, the survivors of Eligio Bishop, who finally were able to share their experience and bring justice to all of the people who, even those who haven't spoken out against him, they're very, very brave. And I hope that we can all recognize their bravery. I love hearing from you guys, so if there's anything that you'd like me to cover or any questions you have, feel free to leave them in the comments down below or email me at erinfinley@gmail.com. Thank you all so, so much for your support. Please stay safe out there and always ask questions and stay a little skeptical. Until next time, y'all. Bye.